All right, everybody, joining the show today for the very first time. He has been covering the Boston Celtics for roughly about 20 years. He is the author of Built Different, the Boston Celtics historic run to the 2024 NBA championship, and of course, the Boston Celtics all-time All-Stars, which you can find on Amazon. You can find on his website. He is the OG of podcasting for the Boston Celtics. He is, of course, the host of Locked On Celtics, the one and only John Karalis. John, appreciate you being here, man.
I appreciate you guys having me. These intros, I love them, but it's like, here are all the ways John is old.
Hey, man, listen, we're hoping that at some point.
I try to sell it. I'm like, hey, man, I've been covering this team for like 20 years now between my blog and everything else. And I'm like, oh, every time I say it, I kick myself down. Yeah, it's like, oh.
Well, hey, our goal is to have somebody intro us like this in the next coming years.
Hey,
we're not that far behind you. We're not that far behind you. So we're creeping up there as well. But something I do want to ask you, because I do feel like you are really, when I said the OG of Boston Celtic podcasting, where like podcasting is still, roughly about a 10-year-old industry. It's not necessarily its own thing, but how long have you actually been podcasting? I know you've been writing about the team, covering the team since the early 2000s. But when was the first podcast that you recorded for the Celtics?
So I guess you can count, like, we started Red's Army back in 2007, 2006, the year they sucked before the championship. and shortly thereafter, we got onto a platform called Blog Talk Radio, where we did live shows. And I don't think the iPod was invented yet for it to be called podcasting. For people who don't know, it was because Apple invented the iPod. That's where podcast came from. So I predate all of that. So I was podcasting before it was called podcasting. And we did a show on Blog Talk Radio once a week. And then, bouncing back and forth, like, I got to give credit to the Celtic Stuff Live guys, because they really were doing it before I was doing it. And they've kind of like tailed off. And I don't know if they're podcasting anymore, which is part of my secret to success. Just outlast everybody. I keep telling people I'm too stupid to quit. So that's how you get introductions like that. But yeah, man, I'd probably say like 2008, 2009, like right after the championship, somewhere in that range, we were doing something where we were talking. If you can't tell, I like to talk.
That's cool, man. Yeah. I actually started Green with Envy during the pandemic, as a lot of podcasts that came up during the pandemic, and
like big podcast explosion. Everybody's
my
like, well, got nothing else to do. Let's talk.
Exactly. And I remember I was listening to your Locked On, and I was like, you know what? Like, I feel like I could do this. I feel like I could try this out. So it was actually listening to you that made me want to try it out. So I appreciate you for holding it down for all these years and letting the newcomers in the game come up.
I love it, man. This is how everybody starts, right? We started Red's Army because Boston Dirt Dogs existed back on Boston. I don't know if it was on Boston.com. So Boston Dirt Dogs was an irreverent baseball Red Sox blog back in the Trot Nixon days. And like Chuck McKinney and I looked at that and like, we could do that. And that's how we started Red's Army. And so everybody saying, hey, we can do that is how the next generation comes along. So you telling that to me, like, I love it, because I'm going to go away at some point, and there's got to be other people holding it down. And I think the Boston Celtics fans are some of the luckiest fans in the world, because there's so many good people covering the team, so many good people talking about the team. You don't have to be a beat writer. You don't have to be all that stuff. You could just be, talking. Excuse me. You could just be talking and having a good conversation, and kind of just about anywhere somebody goes to find a podcast or something written, with all the blogs that are still out there. There's so much good Celtics content out there. So I'm psyched. I'm psyched for you guys.
It's funny. Thank you. Appreciate that. The first episode that I recorded with somebody else was actually not with Will. It was with Kari Thompson, who I know that's like
to the beat.
Yeah, Kari's
our guy, regular on.
Kari went to Boston Latin. I graduated 07. I think he graduated like 2012 or 13, but I was his basketball coach back in the day. And I was like his personal trainer. Cause I don't know if you know, Kari's been 6'6" since he was 12 years old. So,
so Kari and I played, we were in Cleveland in the playoffs, and a bunch of people got a game together. I'm an old man. I'm 51, so I don't play as much anymore. But I was like, hell, I'll go run with these young kids. And Kari, he came out, and like I'm posting him up. I'm like, I feel like I'm posting up a grizzly bear. Like, what am I? Who planted an oak tree on the block? What am I supposed to do with this guy? He's a huge guy, but man, good dude, just solid dude all the way around.
So real quick on that
literally
point,
and figuratively.
So on that point, I had this on our show rundown here. I was going to get this at the end, but we're going to jump it up in the rundown to right now because we're already talking about it. So Greg and I have pestered Kari with questions about this because Greg and I kind of want the smoke. We saw everybody getting together on the beat. Greg and I just got done with our men's league game last night. So we're still trying to hold on to what we have. We're both 35 years old. We're holding on to what we have. I literally have a Tiger Bomb patch on my back right now as we're talking, just recovering from my 20 minutes of run last night. But I got to know from you, John, because, you know, you played at Emerson. You mentioned you're a little bit older than some of the other guys on the beat, but I mean, you're an all-time legend at Emerson. You played overseas. Like, who can hoop and who can not hoop on this Celtics beat? I need you to give us the breakdown on the scouting report.
Yeah, like I know Jay King can play a bit. Adam Himmelsbach can actually shoot the hell out of the ball. Who else have I played? Well, I played with Kari. He's a big dude. Noah Dalzell is, you know, she's new. She's like, but she's.
I've seen some clips. I forget who it is. I don't know if it's Jack or someone else has been cutting up a couple clips every now and then that we've seen. We've been able to get a few glimpses of some action.
She's like Peyton Pritchard, man. She's just like all over the place. She can shoot a little bit too. Yeah, there are a few people who can play for sure. I mean, it makes me wish I was back like your age, like show people a thing or two. Now I'm just like, I'm like a rhino. I'm big and heavy now. I got short bursts of speed, and then I got to rest for a while. So that's all I got.
Got the old man YMCA game, right?
Yeah, you know, a lot of fadeaways, setting a ton of picks, you know, settling for a lot of jumpers that I probably shouldn't take, that kind of stuff. It used to be back in the day where I could, like, my game was actually like jumping and making decisions in the air. And it got to a point where I was like, by the time I made a decision, I had started to land. And I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't work anymore. You know, when you're on your feet and going like, oh no, I should have. Oh, okay, never mind. Yeah. So lots of posting up, setting picks, and fadeaway jumpers.
I love
next time you guys make it down here, Greg and I want in. So if you guys are in San Antonio, we'll come down to San Antonio. If we can find some way in Texas to make it happen, Greg and I want to get involved in one of these runs. You know, being down here in Texas, we're not always able to link up. But if we can make that happen, this is having a podcasters tournament is something Greg and I have been pitching for a couple of years.
I'll try to make sure we're all going to the San Antonio game, and we'll try to get that going. I am trying to get myself back into the gym so I can hang a little bit.
Motivation, John.
I gotta. Like, I will say they're probably helping me out a bit because I'm sitting here like, you know, like I said, once you hit 50, you're like, there's no coach telling me to run anymore. I'm not running. And then all these young kids keep like, oh, old man, you want to come play? I'm like, oh, fine. I played one game. I'm like, oh my God, my knee is so mad at me. So.
And you played outside. That's crazy. I stopped playing outside on outdoor courts when I was like 26 years old.
It's brutal. It's not fun. But you know, I'm competitive, and I know every fiber of my being is telling me, don't bother. Let the kids go play. But there's like that competitive, like tiny bit of my brain is like,
I can take.
Oh, okay. So you're a wuss now. Okay. And I'm just like, right. Oh, damn it.
Oh man, it's crazy. Even I was home in Boston this past weekend, actually, John, and my 6-year-old nephew my dad, we had a basketball hoop in my backyard, so my dad lowered it to 8.5 feet. So my nephew's telling me like, "Oh, like Uncle Greg, can you dunk? Can you dunk?" And I'm like, I don't need to be dunking on concrete right now. But the ego in my brain was like, I gotta put on a dunk contest for my nephew. Like I gotta show him that Uncle Greg can do it. So I'm doing all these dunks in the backyard. And then the next day I woke up and I was like, what the hell was I thinking? I didn't need to impress. He would have been just as impressed with me dunking on a mini hoop hanging off of a door.
Yeah.
Like, what was I doing?
There's a competitive side that I can't resist. A friend of mine asked me to go play this like over 50 flag football thing. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds fun. And my wife was like, you are not going to go do that, because if you do, you will break both your legs, because you can't just go and just be like, oh, I'm going to go and just mess around and who cares what happens. If I'm going to go to whatever it is, flag football, if there's anything competitive, all of a sudden I get into like, I'm still 20 something. I've got to win. If I don't win, I get really mad and all of that. Like that old thing keeps, it doesn't go away. Like we went axe throwing. Who cares about couples axe throwing? Like 6 couples went axe throwing and I missed the target and I come around and I'm talking to myself as I'm walking back. And I heard my wife and a friend of mine, she's like, he's just so damn competitive. He can't let it go. Like I can't.
You can't
like
turn the juice off. Once the faucet's open, you can't close it.
I'm telling you, it just does not stop. So I've learned to like get out of it faster than I used to, but it's still there. If it's not a hard button to press with me. And like I have to be better. At some point my body's going to be like broken enough where I won't have a choice, but for now I'm like, oh.
Yeah, and I would highly recommend not joining the over 50 leagues, because my dad, I think he's 65 now or 64 now. But when he was 50, he got this juice to start playing baseball again, because he was a really good baseball player. He played hockey at Harvard, and I think he hit like a double into the gap, and he was coming around first base, and he decided that he was going to go head first slide into second base, and he separated his shoulder.
Yeah.
Dad, you don't need,
and ended that experiment
I love
very quickly.
seeing it. I love seeing it, but it was just so hard to see him just like he played one game and he separated his shoulder.
Yep. I thought you were going to say he like tore a quad trying to stretch it to 3. Yeah.
Still got the speed, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Well, I'm going to use this discussion here about competitiveness, and I want to transition us into the interview that you did, John, with Joe Mazzulla, who, good God, Joe Mazzulla is the same age as Greg and I. I can't imagine what his competitive juice is going to look like when he gets to be 50, 51 years old, because this man is on a different level of his competitive nature. And I have to tell you, I am 100% fascinated by Joe Mazzulla's personality. It is so intriguing to me on so many levels, and especially during that first year when he took over as head coach from Ime right as training camp was getting started. And we're barreling towards training camp starting here. Media day is about 11 days away as we're recording this right now, which really seems insane. But that first year that Joe Mazzulla was the head coach, I called him consistently that he's just an algorithm of a coach, because he felt so robotic in everything that he was trying to do. He was, it didn't compute to me what he was trying to compute in his own personality. And I think you really saw a giant shift in that in year 2, where he got more comfortable just being himself. And being himself is, once, like I said, I'm fascinated by who Joe Mazzulla is. And so I want to ask you, as you're getting ready for that interview, and this is something I've talked with Drew Carter about when he came on the show as well, because I can see it with Drew. Has a very natural social instinct. Like we've had Drew on a couple times. He's very easy to connect with. I can see him trying to consistently find ways to connect with Joe, and it's so hard. Joe makes it really hard because he loves living in that awkward place, and he openly admits he loves living in the awkward. So what was it like for you? And I know you have obviously a little bit of a history with him covering the team on a day-to-day basis. What's it like getting ready for an interview with Joe Mazzulla, where this is an audio medium that you got to try and get people interested in? What's it like in the preparation for that?
So it really, because I know him a bit, I knew kind of the direction I wanted to go. First of all, I didn't want the interview to just be like, So how's Kristaps doing? What do you think about these guys? Like, we're gonna get to that stuff on media day. I know he's not gonna give me anything there. This interview was more about Joe the person, Joe's strategy, Joe's mentality, and kind of tapping into that. So I already like what you're getting into in a conversation with him. Honestly, my preparation for an interview like that is a whole lot of like visualization. Like I take the dogs out for a walk, and for half an hour in my head, I'm having that conversation with Joe and trying to anticipate what is he going to say. So I can kind of like sometimes I do that and like I don't even realize where my brain's going to go, and I try to anticipate, okay, what kind of answers would he give to this question? And then I come up with a follow-up to that. So I kind of have like a roadmap to things that I think he might say. So when he says something that I like, you can't anticipate half of what he's going to say. But when I've got like those bases covered, when he comes up with something that I didn't expect, I can at least be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. It gives me, I think, the opportunity to follow up on the unexpected stuff. When you can, like, I always say, in all my million analogies, like if you're looking out the window and you see just red car after red car after red car after red car, and you just do that every day, and then all of a sudden one day a yellow car comes by and you're like, wait, what's that doing here? Like when something different comes along, it springs you to be like, oh, I didn't expect that. And the point of that is I spent days trying to anticipate what he's going to say. So when he says the stuff that I anticipate, I can be like, okay, that's nice. If I had a follow-up, I can go with that. But when he says something that I didn't anticipate, that's my trigger to be like, okay, let's either just let him go, because the key to talking to Joe Mazzulla is just letting him go. And then if you can get a sense of like, okay, I didn't expect this. Let me just add give me one more follow-up on that, because he might want to say more. Like, I think one thing with Joe is I think he wants to say a lot of things. He wants to explain how he's coming to certain things, because everybody calls him crazy and psycho and all this other stuff. But there's a method there, and I think he really does want to explain why. And you just got to figure out at what point, like where he is trying to explain, and then just kind of like, okay, let's pick at that for a little bit.
So what was the most unexpected thing that he said that you then were able to learn something about him?
Well, the Broadway show, going to a Broadway show and charting the breathing of the actors.
Yeah.
That was unexpected. But that's where you get the moments of like, you understand, Joe, that your brain doesn't work like everybody else's. And he's like, yeah, my wife tells me that a lot. And then he just goes into like the next thing, like, but blah, blah, blah. And the depth of how he's just always on. He can never turn off the observation. The fact that he can never just watch a sporting event for the sake of watching a sporting event. You can't just go to Olympic track and field. Like me, I'm saying, okay, here's my opportunity. I'm in Paris. I'm going to watch this 4x4 relay and just enjoy it, because these are some of the best athletes in the world. Let me just bask in the glory of human athletic achievement. Sorry. And he's like, nope, I am taking baton handoffs, and I'm going to make my guys do baton handoffs in practice, because
was he being serious about that?
Yes, I guarantee you that he is going to have them practice baton handoffs in practice, because that, first of all, it makes them uncomfortable. And Joe loves making people uncomfortable, because when you get to the uncomfortable, then you can kind of like start examining, okay, why is this uncomfortable to you? Why do you lean on this? Why do you not lean on that? So he's going to get them out of a comfort zone. The last thing he needs his team to be is comfortable during the season. So yeah, are you kidding me? Like he would have them swimming with the killer whales so they can observe exactly how they hunt if he could, but he will have them do baton toss handoffs in practice 100%. And the fact that he took that as it's the simplest part, but is also when, he talked about duress a lot. These guys can do handoffs on an empty track all day long and not screw it up. But in Olympic competition, all of a sudden that extra boost of adrenaline, the challenge of a guy from France running 3 inches on your right, and then a guy from, Italy running next to you on the left, and you've got to get this perfectly, and your adrenaline's pumping and his adrenaline's pumping. And how can you do it then? How can you do the thing that you've done all the time on your own in a controlled, comfortable environment? How can you do it in the most stressful, crazy, chaotic environment? Can you still do it as well as you do it when you're alone? That's Joe's philosophy, like in a nutshell. Can the Celtics do all of the stuff that they can do in practice under controlled circumstances? Can they do it when the craziness is going on? And that's why the baton thing is, because it's not comfortable, and he wants them to do uncomfortable things well.
For sure. And with Joe, his growth from year 1 to year 2 was pretty stark,
Huge.
it was huge. Going into year 3 in your interview, he talked about going back to the basics. You had mentioned like, oh, are we going to skip the first 3 pages and just start from there, or do we have to go back to the basics? And his response was, not only are we going to go back to the basics, we're going to go back to before the basics.
Yeah.
So what do you think, knowing Joe and being around the team as much as you are, what do you think that looks like?
I think that just looks like some menial kind of like, probably like bounce pass drills, like the type of stuff. I wouldn't be surprised at, like, I think, have you ever been to like a basketball camp? Like when I was a kid, I went to Providence College basketball camps when I was in high school, and you have the stations, and you have to go.
Oh yeah,
The dribbling station, like dun dun dun. Okay,
Dana
now you're
Barrow's
doing
basketball camp alums, right?
yeah, I think like a lot of us have been to these camps. There's 6 hoops. That's dribbling. That's passing. That's, screen setting, like all of that stuff. I wouldn't be surprised if Joe was like, okay, we're doing that. We're doing stations and we're doing rotations just like high school kids, because you might think like everything is with a message. So if on day 1, like I'm sitting here thinking like, hey man, defending champs, they can come in on day 1 and be like, we know last year's playbook. Here's 100 different plays that we can add to last year's playbook. I wouldn't be surprised if he goes the opposite way and does the most basic, tiny little things, so the guys get the message like, yeah, we're going to do 100 dribbles right hand, 100 dribbles left hand. We're going to do chest passes and bounce passes, because we need to hammer home the most basic of basic things before we can go back to the stuff that we know. And
John, real quick, how many form shooting stations do you think he'll put Jayson Tatum through?
just an hour on the side basket. Just sit there and shoot. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what happened with Jayson's jumper in the playoffs. And it was we just talked about it last night on my podcast. Like, he shot 37% from 3 during the regular season. All of a sudden it goes down to like 28. Like, all right, fix that, will you?
He didn't hit a single jump shot throughout the entire Team USA run.
It's so weird. It's so weird. He was probably drunk throughout half of that stuff. Like, he's probably still celebrating. No, I don't know. I don't know why.
What is your concern level with the Jayson Tatum jump shot? Because I will say, it is something for me personally, as we're going to try to transition a little bit to some of the training camp preview here, that I have, like, if we're looking at it from I was thinking about this the other day, if we're on like a scale of 1 to 10, I'm probably somewhere at about a 3.5, a 4 with it. Like, not quite there yet, but I'm totally ready, because with this team, they're bringing back so much continuity. There's not going to be a ton to react and overreact to. This is absolutely a hot button issue where I'm probably going to overreact at some point, one way or the other, whether it's a good run in the preseason or the first couple games are cold. But where are you at on the concern level of that Jayson Tatum jump shot?
It's so funny that you mentioned that scale of 1 to 10, because I was literally thinking as you were asking the question, I'm like, on a scale of 1 to 10, it's probably about like a 4. Like it's low. Yeah. It's low, but it's not nothing. I've never liked Jayson Tatum's jumper. He's got long arms. His elbow bends a funny way. He tucks it in. I don't know if you guys saw the video from the finals that I tweeted out of Kristaps Porzingis kind of making fun of Jayson's like big like shimmy, and he brings it like all the way up and shit. Like like it's a lot, and I do think there's like, to me, a jumper is supposed to be like the least amount of movement possible. Like you don't want to dip very low. You want to keep it here in the pocket and just go straight up and release. And the more you add to it is just another place for something to get funky. And, when you're shooting, whoops, sorry guys. When you're shooting a jump shot, everything has to be precise. When you're shooting a 3-pointer, the margin of error shrinks. So I just think something with Tatum's jumper is like something's a little off, and it's throwing the whole thing off. And I just we were talking about it last night. There might be something to like the past couple of years. He's been a lot more of a primary ball handler, and he's taking a lot more off the dribble shots, and that's typically a lower percentage shot. I'd like to see him do a little bit more on the catch and shoot side to get him going a little bit. I'd like to see him kind of get more comfortable, get to the rim a little bit first before he starts shooting 3-pointers. But I feel like there's something there, but it's probably just a little mechanical thing that needs fixing. I don't think his jumper is broken necessarily. But yeah, we've gone so long because the last things we've seen are a playoff run and a summer Olympic run where it's just been gone. And now we don't have like normally during the season when he goes through a slump, which he always does, he'd have like a 7 for 10 stretch where we're like, okay, he's fine. But the next 7 for 10 stretch might happen in Abu Dhabi, like, so we got to wait to see if like our concern levels can be lowered.
Yeah, and like it's funny. Like, the last things that we've seen, he was recently on that Shanghai tour with Zion and Luca and Paolo, and I was actually on vacation at the time, so I wasn't like fully locked in. But I happened to just see someone put up a clip, and it was Tatum pulling up in this like Shanghai pickup run, and I was like, all right, I really need to see, just as much as Tatum needs to see one go through the basket, I personally need to see one go through the basket, and this shot could not have been more far off the left side of the rim, just like completely nowhere close. The highlight was, I think Paolo got the rebound, and I was like, why did we need to put this out there? Even in the pickup run, I don't need to see this. So, as much as I hate the offseason content of Russell Westbrook's in the lab, look at the jump shot, it's remade. We've seen Precious Achiuwa shooting threes. I hate that content.
Andre Drummond hitting threes in offseason videos.
Right.
Like,
I can't stand it. It's ridiculous. But Brett Hampton, I'm begging you right now, man. Put together one of Jayson Tatum. I just as much as I can't stand that content, I could use a little bit of that bullshit Jayson Tatum content in my life right now. That's my request to Brett.
I love that you shouted out Brett Hampton and you're like, just give me a compilation video of him making jumpers. That's amazing. I'm happy for Brett Hampton, by the way.
Awesome,
Dorchester kid.
Dorchester kid gets a job with his like his favorite team, and then just becomes part of like Tatum's guy, and that dude's gonna get a championship ring. I see Brett before every game at the practices. Talk about like high quality individual. That dude is a good dude. I want to say it out there on the podcast. I'm very happy for him. It's a really cool story.
Yeah, so on that, let's actually go to the other Jay. And let's actually, we can kind of work them in together here, because this is something I wanted to ask you
Mhm.
is, with this team finding, and this is part of what you talked about Joe Mazzulla with, this kind of like finding motivation, right? As defending the title. I know he doesn't like that. We're going to say it a lot. Defending the title. You got to find this certain
Attacking a
level
title,
of
Will.
attacking a title.
Attacking
Right.
a
Yeah,
title.
exactly. I got to get this verbiage down if we're ever going to get Mazzulla on this podcast. And so one of the things that constantly has been brought up as discourse on multiple shows is that, what happened this offseason with Team USA for both Jays is going to be fuel, going to be that chip on the shoulder, if you will, with Jaylen and his feud with Team USA / Nike, and then obviously Tatum not getting playing time, and that being a big part of the discourse around what ended up being a gold medal. How much do you buy into that actually being something that fuels and motivates them? You're around the team, these guys at least a little bit. Like, do you think that's actually going to be something that carries over, or is that just people trying to fill the air in the offseason?
A little both. Everything in the offseason gets magnified, because we got to talk about something. And people like me with podcasts, like every day, you're like, oh, okay, yeah, let's explore this studio space. But Jaylen especially is one to take slights like that personally. He's the much more serious, emotional, like internal emotional one. Um, he definitely has more of the mentality of like, I'm trying to prove people wrong. Jayson may have that, but it doesn't come off that way. Like you don't get to be as good as these guys are without finding motivation in every little corner of anything you can find, because it's tough to maintain your intensity, the longer your career goes. And Jayson is such an easygoing guy that he is the epitome of never too high, never too low. But somewhere in there is that level of competitiveness that he understands, hey, I do have something still to prove. And everything that I did where I thought, hey, I'm certified, like, yeah, nobody cares. But Jaylen, I think especially is one to take it to heart. Now, how it shows up, that's going to be the Joe Mazzulla question, because I think one of my favorite things that Joe said in the interview was about the concept of them getting revenge and those guys using it as fuel. It's good to have it short term every once in a while. Every once in a while, you need an ego boost. It's like a cup of coffee. You need a little caffeine shot to get you going, but that's not what gives you. There you go. That's not what gives you the energy, right? Like you need to sleep well and eat right and exercise and all that stuff to maintain your energy throughout the day. So that's the season, right? The season is about doing all the little things that you need to do. The long-term goal and the long-term motivation is not revenge. That's good for a short-term thing. So yeah, if Jaylen and Jayson want to take revenge on Golden State because Steve Kerr is the coach and Steph is one of the players that played ahead of Jayson and whatever, then fine. But as long as that's the cup of coffee and not the only way they get motivated all season long. So I do think they will take some, but Joe has to be and the whole staff and they have to make sure the players are still fully bought into the process is still the process. And you cannot skip any steps, and you cannot just sit there and go on a big I'm proving everybody wrong mission, because that's not the goal here. The goal isn't to prove people wrong, it's to win another championship. So you can prove people wrong along the way, but as long as you know what the bigger picture is, you're fine.
Yeah, and I think with Jaylen, your comment about him being like the more serious one and the one who's more likely to utilize that to fuel the fire, it just makes me think of that tweet that he had put out about his teacher who told him that she'd look him up in Cobb County Jail in 5 years, right? And he had a quote about that where he said, "You don't really forget instances like that. You use it as fuel and then you move on." Right. And I think with Jaylen, he dropped a song this summer called Just Do It. Like he clearly is bought into this feud with Nike, with Team USA. And as someone who has been the Jaylen guy on this podcast, like I love Jaylen Brown. He's my favorite player on the team. I love how he continues to improve. And I felt like last year he may have reached the ceiling, right, of what he can be as a player, which is a hell of a player. And then all of this added fuel in the offseason, you see him back underwater. Talk about putting yourself in uncomfortable situations. Jaylen Brown is doing that this summer. I'm expecting Jaylen to have one hell of a year in this upcoming season because of that revenge factor. And I actually wanted to ask you this because the Jayson Tatum MVP discourse is already starting, right? He was on Jimmy Fallon. He predicted
training camp's close when that conversation comes back
up. Zach Lowe mentioned how he was surprised at how the SB Nation list of 9 MVP candidates did not include Jayson Tatum on that. My question to you, John, is what do you think is more likely? Peak off-season content right here. Jayson Tatum winning an MVP or Jaylen Brown making a second team All-NBA?
Jaylen. Yeah. I think Jayson is an incredible player, and I wouldn't put it past him to get an MVP at some point, but when you look at what the MVP typically is, people see this is why Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is at like the top of the list and Anthony Edwards is getting discussed. It's a singular player with a certain charisma. Think kids nowadays are calling it aura. There's some level of thing with these players that draws voters' eyes. And what we saw with Jayson this past season, and especially in the playoffs, his job has turned into draw a lot of the attention and create for the rest of your team. And he's not having, and like we just said, like his jumper kind of abandoned him in the playoffs. So he's going to need that to be he's going to need that to come back if he's going to have any chance at an MVP. But Jayson is more of a let me occupy 2 players, start the ball moving, and then get it back and score. Occasionally, obviously, attacking the mismatches, but he's taking a brunt of the defense. So guys like Derek White and Drew Holiday and Al Horford can succeed, and Jaylen Brown. Jaylen is doing some of that too, but because Jayson is the primary guy kind of occupying defenders, Jaylen gets to be the guy that attacks. He's got more highlight dunks. He's got some of the more spectacular plays. His defense is, I think last year was a little underrated. He probably should have gotten a little more attention for it. I think that might change a little bit this year. So I think Jaylen will be seen, especially if the Celtics win another 60 games this year. I think him not making an All-NBA team last year, people are going to be like, that might have been a mistake. There might be a little bit of correction there with the voting. So I just think Jaylen's in a position where making All-NBA is more likely. And think about it. You just have to be one of the top 10 guys, really. Whereas MVP, you have to be the number 1 guy. So just statistically, it's going to be harder for Jayson to do it. I don't know I don't know if Jayson's going to win an MVP over the course of his career. That's going to be an interesting discussion when people talk about legacies down the road. Like, where is he going to fit in the entire hierarchy of everything if he never wins an MVP? I don't know how that's going to go. It's going to be really interesting. The Celtics championship window might have to close before he wins an MVP, because then he's going to have to start doing things. And look, the second apron is going to change things. It's going to cut down the talent. So in 2-3 years, when Jayson is like 29 or 30 and there's less talent, he's going to have to do more. Maybe that's his MVP season. But right now, with this level of talent, he doesn't have to score as much. He's got to do other things to open up things for everybody else.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting when you put it like that, right? Because it's obviously a realistic chance the Celtics could go back to back. It can be very difficult, but there is a chance that they do that. And then all of a sudden you look at it where it's Jayson Tatum's been the best player on a championship team twice, no MVPs. Jokic got 1 MVP. Giannis has one MVP or has multiple MVPs. Excuse me, they have multiple MVPs and one NBA championship. And you're like, something's not kind of correlating here, right? So I think the way that you're describing, if there is a path towards Tatum winning an MVP, it is going to be if and when the CBA makes the Celtics break this team up. And so a question I wanted to ask you, is the only way, and we're talking about the main core of this team, which the Celtics are running it back, like we mentioned earlier, is the only way that this team is the core of this team is together beyond this season if they win a title this year, because those finances get really out of control starting next season.
I don't know what's going to happen next season. Like, win or not win, that team is going to be super expensive. And it depends on how the ownership thing shakes out. If it's how I think it's going to go, and Pagliuca and a team of current owners kind of just buys the majority, then I think they can keep it together because they know what they have here, and they can go one more run with the team as constituted. Got to understand that eventually there's expansion money coming in. There's more TV money coming in year to year. So you can say next season's going to be extraordinarily expensive, but you can also say, I know I'm getting, this bit here, and I know I'm getting that bit there. It's like you're buying a car and you're like, well, I can go for this version, but I know I'm getting a promotion. I know I'm getting a bonus. I know this stuff, I'm getting more money. Maybe I'll go for like the XL version of this, and you treat yourself a little bit. That might be how it goes with the ownership group. So if they win, I think they might keep it together one more year. Then organically, because Porzingis' contract and I think Holiday's contract is up, they can.
Holiday got the extension, so he'll be here. He's going to be on the books for a while.
So he's what? No, right. So he's for 3 more years, right?
After this year, I believe.
Porzingis' contract comes off, and then Holiday's expiring. So what they could do is trade him into somebody's cap space or something. There are ways for them to kind of like drop the payroll and ease the tax burden, get below the second apron. Definitely not beyond next year. If they don't win this year, I don't know. I honestly don't know. Like they might keep it together just to be like, it's our last gasp with this group. It's our last. We got one more shot.
Right.
Let's try to win a championship one more time before we all know what's going to happen. So it's really hard to say. That team's going to be so expensive that the temptation is there to say, yeah, let's just do it again. But it's money. Money is money, and that's a whole lot of money. And rich people don't like spending their money. They like keeping their money. So I can go either way on that. It's a lot of talking for not a real answer.
Okay, we're at 42 minutes here, so I know we got to get you out of here. I got a couple training camp questions for you.
Yeah.
First, just give me one. It's not really a question, but give me one prediction for training camp, kind of out of the box.
I think Lonnie Walker has an impressive training camp, and there's a lot of talk about people cutting, like about him being cut or something. I think Lonnie Walker comes in, shows out, and makes the team, and makes, not only that, he becomes part of the rotation. Like by the time training camp is over, we'll be slotting Lonnie Walker in as like 7th, 8th.
Will he be the new O'Shea Brissett player, essentially, as far as what that rotation looks like?
I think he can be like O'Shea Brissett plus, where he could be the guy that even gets in before Peyton Pritchard on some nights based on opponents, like size. If you're playing a team that's big, he could be the guy that comes in like as your 7th man, or if Sam Hauser doesn't have it on a certain night, you might plug Lonnie Walker in. Like I feel like he has the potential to be a real contributor. So my training camp prediction is that he forces the Celtics to keep him.
Sounds like you're just surprised in general that he's on an exhibit 10 contract that he
been
wasn't able to get.
surprised,
I like Lonnie Walker's
understand
game
it
as
at
well.
all.
Like
Like,
it's
I
kind of
get
crazy.
I get he's limited in certain things. Like he can be a passable defender, but he's not always a good defender. He can be a good scorer, but he's not always the best scorer. But he's still a viable bench player. I don't understand how he's fallen to exhibit 10 potential camp cut. Like, I cannot fathom the idea of Lonnie Walker playing in the G League this year. Like, I know I'm not going to pretend that he's a starter, but he's not a G leaguer.
Yeah. The fact that he can't be your 8th, 9th guy seems kind of crazy that there wasn't a role out there for him. So yeah, I'm with you. I think Lonnie Walker is kind of a steal. So we'll have to see how that plays out. But let's get you out of here with one final question, John. Who would you say in the East? We're talking about the Celtics potentially repeating. A couple of moves were made. Obviously, the Knicks and Sixers made the most significant moves in the East. How do you look at the East as far as who can challenge the Celtics to even prevent them from getting back to the finals? Never mind, keep the West out of it for now because that's going to be a dogfight all season.
Sure, yeah.
But let's just look at the East. How do you kind of stack up the challengers in the East?
So I'm putting New York second.
Right along with the same thoughts of the show.
Yeah, I just think it's more their attitude. Like, the Sixers have, I think, a better, like, trio. The Embiid, Paul George, Maxey trio is, I think, better than the 3 in New York, but I think the injuries, first of all, in Philly have the potential to derail them. And I just think New York plays harder, better, tougher basketball. So, and so much of this depends on Porzingis, and it depends on Horford. If Horford is still the 3-point shooter that he was the past couple of seasons, then that helps because all 3 of those teams have drop bigs. Mitchell Robinson, Joel Embiid, Brook Lopez are all drop coverage bigs. And if you have Horford for the first couple of months able to draw them out, then that makes it difficult for them to play the style that they want to play. If Horford can't hit the shots, if he regresses at all, that makes things difficult. If Porzingis has, any sort of injury or anything like that, that hurts because the Celtics' strength is stretching the floor out, taking your rim protector away and all of that stuff. So, but I still feel like New York is going to be that annoying type of, like, yeah, the Celtics are better. There are places for them to attack, but they just are such annoying little shitheads that you can't shake them. Milwaukee is, I think too many people have written off Milwaukee. I think the consistency, even though, like, Doc Rivers is who he is and Dame had a bad season, everybody talks about the personal stuff that he was going through last year. That's kind of been like, no one's made that an excuse, but I think the transition to Milwaukee was very difficult for him. So I'm not ruling out consistency from the beginning, a more focused Damian Lillard, and a couple of moves just to shore up a little defensive kind of issues. I think Milwaukee can be right back in there. Like, by Thanksgiving, you can hear, like, NBA Today talking about, wow, Milwaukee's really reinserted themselves, as challengers at the top of the East. So those are the 3 obvious roadblocks. But Orlando's going to be tough. Orlando plays Boston tough. They're big, physical. Banchero is, kind of, I feel like he's been a little lost in the conversation of great young players. And if Franz Wagner can regain his shooting touch, Orlando's going to be really, really tough. Cleveland, we'll see. We'll see if that combination of Mitchell and Garland is they had, I think they, with a new coach and a new, kind of renewed kind of commitment to each other, that could be a tough combination. Like if they figure out how to play together, that could be tough. So the East is not, and I didn't even mention Indiana, who was the toughest. And Joe mentioned in the podcast,
yeah,
they were the toughest. They were the toughest series for the Celtics, even though it was a sweep. So the East is tough, but top 3: New York, Philly, Milwaukee, and that next 3 of Indy, Orlando, Cleveland. That's not going to be easy either. The difference between the East and the West is once you get past those 3, everybody else sucks. You know.
Yeah.
Miami,
yeah,
I'll give them a little credit. We'll see what Miami.
You got to always got. That's the Bostonians. Got to throw Miami in there.
Throw Miami a bone. I don't know. We'll see what Jimmy Butler is.
Got to throw them in there. Well, John, we've kept you long enough here, man. We really do appreciate your time and having you on here, man. For those of you listening, of course, you know where to find John. You can find him on Locked On Celtics daily podcast once the season gets up and running here. And of course, we mentioned his books before that you can purchase from his website as well as go check them out on Amazon. John, we appreciate you joining us here. Greg, any final thoughts before we introduce John to some Black Sheep Optimists here on the way out?
No, man. Thank you. You're a legend, so we appreciate you joining the show.
Please. Thank you.
All right, John. Appreciate it, man. And as always, guys, remember to like, subscribe, follow us wherever you can across social media. Definitely go and hit us up on the YouTube page. We are getting back into our regular rhythm. Summer vacation is over. We're back. Training camp coming up here. Media day just about less than 2 weeks away. So we'll be hitting you really hard with a lot of content coming out here in the near future. But as always, this is some Black Sheep Optimists from Greg's band down here in Austin, Texas. We will catch you guys later.
It feels like summer, baby. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. So fly, the sky will kiss you. Lips so smooth, I miss your issues. Oh mama, feel like summer. New season got me seeing new colors. Oh my, I'm slipping into white lies and time to miss you. Now you're 3 shots deep that you chase with the Croy. You're looking at me while you're making that noise. I've been trying